Okay, I want to show you my old trick for dovetailing. I have another video that I did called an old trick for hand cut dovetails, and it wasn't shot very good, so this is a redo of that video. I started out in '82 and I went about 8 years just doing carpentry and finished things and finished carpentry, and I was making things that whole time, but I wasn't really serious into it till about '88. I started to really get serious about furniture and cabinet making and woodworking. I was making things the whole time, but I didn't start getting serious till '88, and by '91 I was very serious and I was starting to make things and sell things, and by '93 I was making furniture every day for a while. And in '91 is when I started first cutting hand cut dovetails. And I had researched some things, and based on the information I had and what felt comfortable to me, I was a pens first kind of cutter. And I made a jig that I've modified lately. The jig was a very simple jig. The ratio was a 6:1 ratio because I was working with softwoods a lot, and I was just getting my feet wet with making dovetails. And a 6:1 is nice for softwoods. 8:1's plenty good for hardwoods. This is overkill for hardwoods. 7:1 is kind of the universal all-purpose dovetail for soft and hardwoods. These are 7:1 dovetails. So are these. I think these are 7:1 dovetails in this piece here. So I made this jig, and the jig was intended to help me get the cut started, because no matter how you do it, there's one cut that's really critical. In the tails, if you look at the tails, which is this part here, this cut needs to be square to the face of the board. If you were talking about the pins and looking at it from this angle, these are the pins, it's that cut that needs to be square. So it needs to be square for either piece, no matter which one you cut first. And really, I don't think it matters which one you cut first. I will say this: when I was making drawers for little pieces, I used to make a shaker table that I sold all the time, and it had a little pull-out drawer, and the front two corners were dovetailed, and the back was a housing joint or dado joint for the back of the drawer. But the front two corners were hand-cut dovetails, and if you do the tails first, you can put both boards, both drawer sides in there, and cut both your sets of tails all at once. You can't do that with pins. So there's an argument for from production standpoint: cut your tails first and stack both your drawer sides as two pieces in the vise, and cut them both together. At any rate, my jig was designed to help me start the saw and lay out. And so it's just a 6:1 ratio angle here on all three pieces, and it's just 3 pieces of wood glued together. Now recently we've seen the advent of these rare earth magnets, which are super duper strong, and they're nice because you can stick your saw to it and they have just the right amount of stick. So they're strong enough to do what we want to do. And I've added these magnets recently. And I got to thinking about that other video, and I said, well, really, I don't use 6:1 dovetails too much, except in soft woods occasionally. 7:1 is kind of my favorite shape now for anything. And I play with the spacing, but I basically stick most of the time with a 7:1. So I made a 7:1 jig out of oak and put the magnets in it, because I think the magnets are a good improvement to the jig. But I used to just take the jig, put it on there, and let's say you were going to lay out this board. I've got a depth already marked here, and I would mark, if I was doing the tails first, if this was a tails first demonstration, I'd mark my 2 half pins, or half tails, whatever you want to call them, off the end. This board's about 5.5, 6 inches wide. I can tell you what it is. It's 5 and almost a half an inch. So, you know, I'm coming in about 3/8 to 7/16 of an inch on each end. I like enough meat there so that you have a sturdy half tail or half pin. And then I just use the jig. If you look at the way it's designed, it leans, and you can use it in either direction, but this way it's square. Or if you were doing pins, it gives you the angle, but this way down is square. It's giving you that cut you need, and it helps you start the saw. And that's all I used it for, was a starter aid, but and a layout aid. But you could set up and mark these tail like this, or the other end you flip it around, mark the tail, half tail down there. And on a deal like this, you might say divide it in thirds, something like that. I'm just eyeballing it. And then let's say those third marks is representative of 3 tails. Then I usually go about half of this amount on either side of my marks, like that. I'm just doing this real fast. And then I'd mark my tails with this jig, and I've already marked the end. So it's a nice layout aid, but then let's say you want to start cutting, you can keep that on there, and with or without the magnet. The magnet's a nice add, but it's not essential. But the magnet is nice because it sticks the saw. You can stick that to it and start your cut. And it makes you start a square cut, which is so critical to the dovetail. And like I say, if you were doing pins first, the jig would be like this. And you'd be doing the pin, but it would help you cut straight up and down, or square to the piece, which is so critical to the dovetail because it's the mating line to this line here. But you really don't need it the whole time. If you want to use it, you can. I used to just take it out of the way once I was started, make my cut. And it's a nice aid for cutting. You can flip it around then and do the other side. And I said in my other video, the right thing would be to clamp this and get your hand out of the way, because your thumb's right here. But you could put a spring clamp on this. But I can hold it, get my cut started, take the thing out of the way, and go on with my cut. So it's just a sawing and layout aid that I think makes enormous sense for a beginner that's just getting used to dovetails. And to be very candid about it, nobody's good at dovetails that doesn't practice them. I know as much as I need to know to do a good basic dovetail joint, but that doesn't mean anything. Knowing what you need to know, me showing you, none of that means anything. Practice is what makes good dovetails. Practice is what makes fast dovetails, if you want to be fast. But this jig helps you establish the hand-eye coordination to get that feel and that practice under your belt. It helps you, especially if you haven't done any for a while. you might be a little out of practice with them. I'll go months and don't do any dovetails, and the jig is nice anyway for the layout, so I've got it out, and if I want to use it to start my cuts, so what? If I want to use it to do the entire cut, so what? You know, is that riding a bike with training wheels? I don't know, but I'm saying it's a good aid, and it helps especially the beginner to do nice dovetails. And the way it's made makes sense for a lot of work with 3/4 and smaller. Most of your dovetails, you got to figure, are not going to be in wood much thicker than 3/4. It can happen, but it's not that common that you'd be dovetailing in something thicker than 3/4. On the everyday basis, you're probably 3/4 and less. And this jig is 3 pieces of 3/4 material, so you know, it sits on there nice and completely crosses the material. It makes a good layout aid. And then if you have thinner material, it's great for that too. So anyhow, this is about 2 1/4 wide, and this is about 4 inches long, 3 3/4, 4 inches long. And like I say, all these angles are the 7-in-1, or in the case of the first, my old jig, my old 1991 jig, they were 6-in-1 ratio. So that's about, I don't know, 9 degrees. This is maybe 8 or 7.5, 8 degrees, something like that would be that cut. And just make it careful, and start out with a board that has square stock, you know, because you want this square this way. That's critical to the function of this. The angle's not really that important, just as in the dovetail. The angle's not all that important. Cutting square across here is. Or if you do pins first, cutting square up and down is critical. The angle's not that important. It just matters that you match the other piece to it. If you lay this on the other piece and draw out your pins, they've got to match that angle. But the angle's not really that critical. The old theory was that in hard woods, they could be less of a wedge because the wood's stronger. In soft woods, they need to be more of a wedge. So that's the reason for the 6-in-1. They're more of a wedge. They're more of a wedge shape, and in soft woods, that's stronger and doesn't bust out, especially on your top and bottom. If you want to leave enough meat there to make a good connection. So this is just a few more shots of the jig and a little better look at it. Thanks for watching.